All right. Now, yesterday, at the end of the podcast, when I do the little bit, 5, 6, 7 minutes for my subscribers, I talked a bit about a trial that ended yesterday in Helena, Montana. And I got into it a little bit and I realized, hey, wait a minute. Okay, my subscribers got a preview of this, but it's an important issue and I think it needs to be talked about during the regular podcast. Consequently, that is precisely what I'm going to do here. This trial, there are 16 plaintiffs in the trial, and the plaintiffs are from the ages 5 to 22. And the plaintiffs say they have been and continue to be harmed by wildfire smoke, excessive heat, and other effects of climate change. So they're asking a judge, or they were asking a judge in Montana to declare unconstitutional a state law in Montana that prevents state agencies from even considering greenhouse gas impacts when these state agencies issue permits for fossil fuel development. They're not even allowed. In Montana state law, agencies are not even allowed to consider what more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is going to do to us, to the whole planet. Oh, Christ. Now, officials in Montana, during the whole thing, this whole trial, tried to downplay. It's a first of its kind trial taking place over the state of Montana's obligations to protect residents from climate change. And Montana officials are, a bunch of kids, And they even went so far as to say on Monday that a verdict in favor of these kids, these young people, you're 22 years old, you're not really a kid. No offense there, 22-year-olds. But even a victory by these young people would not change the way the state of Montana approves these death projects. They don't give a shit. They're just not going to do anything, apparently, is the idea here. No matter what the verdict is, it's like the state officials are saying flat out, face up, to these young people, screw you. We don't even care if you do get a verdict in your favor. We're not going to do a damn thing. The attorneys for the Montana Republican Attorney General, yeah, well, you knew it would be Republicans, Christian terrorists, didn't you? The attorneys for the Attorney General laid out their defense following a week of often emotional testimony in state court from young people who sued the state back in 2020. That's when this began. Now, the final arguments were expected yesterday. I don't know if a verdict has been rendered, and it might have been might not have been a jury trial. I'm not sure yet. Maybe I'll know here in a minute. But the trial, the final arguments ended days earlier than scheduled because the state of Montana, you want to hear arrogance? The state of Montana did not call one witness. And there was one expert witness they were going to call who was expected to testify. And the state of Montana decided to limit the testimony of a second expert. Now, let us guess why. The one witness was told, go away. And the other witness had his testimony severely curtailed. Why do you think the state decided that? The attorneys for the plaintiffs, the young people, had questioned the credibility of these two witnesses because the two witnesses had said in, I guess, pretrial motions that Montana's greenhouse gas contributions made no difference to the global totals. No difference. We might as well continue. Now, the truth is that the state of Montana has never, not once, not ever in the state's history, denied a permit for a fossil fuel extraction project. That's according to the plaintiff's attorneys. But the state's lead environmental regulator said Monday that permitting practices would not change if these young people won their case. So it was the state's lead environmental regulator. Would you say that's a bullshit title for this guy? I would. And then we have the Department of Environmental Quality, and the director of that department in the state of Montana is a person named Chris Dorrington. And Chris Dorrington said this, quote, "We do not have the authority to not permit something that fully complies with the law. We're not the ones that created the law. We're the ones that implement the law." So what you have here is the state regulators, in this case, the environmental quality director, and the state's environmental regulator, both saying, hey, essentially what they're saying is, hey, tough shit, sorry. Even if you win the case, we don't care. We can't do anything about it. We're not the ones that created the law, yada, 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 yada. Keep just living here in Montana and dealing with the fact that we are part of the problem and we will continue to be part of the problem. And you young people, fuck off. What are you doing? I mean, what are you, a 5-year-old up to 22-year-old? Now, Montana state officials also drew a distinction between the law being challenged, which is what these kids have done, which is a provision of the Montana Environmental Protection Act that the state officials characterized as a procedure. How do you challenge a procedure, right? That's the point they were making. And they compare that to regulatory acts such as the Clean Air Act of Montana. And what these bastards are saying is only regulatory acts can be used as the basis for permit rejections. And those regulatory acts don't allow permits to be denied in Montana based on climate impacts. That's according to a woman named Sonia Nowakowski, who is the director of Air, Energy, and Mining Division Administrator. That's what Sonia is. So there's the third state official in Montana saying, we don't care if you win. We've never turned down a permit to continue to kill life on Earth. We're not going to do it. You kids, go the fuck away. Why aren't you in elementary school or kindergarten? Get out of here. I have real issues with this case, as you can tell by the way I'm carrying on. Now, these young plaintiffs testified over 5 days that climate change was hurting their lives. They say smoke from worsening wildfires is choking the air they breathe. Drought is drying up rivers that sustain agriculture and fish and wildlife and recreation. Oh, kids, come on. Hey, we the oil industry, the coal industry, a lot of coal under Montana. Come on, sit down, be quiet. And Olivia Vasovich, who is 20 years old, she's a student at the University of Montana, who grew up in Missoula, Montana. She said she suffers from breathing problems. And when these wildfires ignite in the forests in Montana, as they do constantly, she says breathing is almost unbearable. And she said in this trial that as her respiratory reactions grew worse during smoke events that have shrouded Missoula, Montana, young Olivia Vasovich and her mother in recent years started taking the kids on trips during fires in search of cleaner air. Mom had to take the kids to Washington State, to Idaho, to different parts of Montana, just so the children can breathe. And young Olivia said, quote, "It feels like it's suffocating me, like if I'm outside for minutes. Climate change is wrecking. It's causing so much havoc on our world right now. And I know that will only be getting worse." End quote. I mean, think about this for just a second. You hear your humble and obedient servant here, moi, constantly talking about this issue. Mostly the way I talk about it is I scream and yell and bitch and complain and wonder why the human species is hell-bent on committing species suicide. But, I'm an old person. You may be, an older person. Okay, I'm an older person. You may be too. These are kids. These are kids saying, essentially, why are you doing this to us? You know the science, adults. You know what dumping CO2 into the atmosphere is doing, adults. You know the kind of death and destruction you're bringing to this planet, adults. So why are you doing this to us? And of course, the state of Montana says, sit down and shut up. And even if you win your case, we're not going to change a damn thing. Wow. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.